Welcome back to the MGI podcast. You are listening to the voices of
Chill with Realms.
Jurassic Mark.
and Osheem, the one and only. Last month's episode was another surprise good movie by Jurassic Mark, Splash, starring Tom Hanks, who has not really been in the news lately, but has been on my mind lately because of a movie called Lightyear, which is kind of related to Toy Story. It's Lightyear, Buzz Lightyear, his origin movie. That's a story in and of itself. Today's episode is about Jurassic World Dominion. I picked this movie for a couple of different reasons. I have been thinking for a while to do a movie based on dinosaurs for a while, kind of ever since last year, or maybe even the year before, 2020, when JMU nominated Dinotopia. That was good. I still remember that. That left an impression on me. And it's been 2 years that we have been doing these podcast episodes. And throughout these past 2 years, I have been wanting to nominate Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which came out in 2018, actually. But as more and more time passed, other movies came up that I wanted to review. And in the interim, Jurassic World Dominion was coming closer and closer. And I figured, why not just have this be the movie we review? And we're going to end up talking about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom anyway. So this movie is the sixth installment of the Jurassic Park film series, the third in the Jurassic World trilogy, and it's supposed to be the conclusion to the entire Jurassic arc, if you will. So it stars Chris Pratt as Owen Grady, Bryce Dallas Howard as Claire, Jeff Goldblum is back as Dr. Ian Malcolm. He had a really short role in Fallen Kingdom as well, but this movie plays upon the nostalgia heartstrings as well. Laura Dern is back as Ellie, Dr. Ellie. Sam Neill is back as Dr. Alan Grant. So there are a couple of new faces as well. DeWanda Wise plays Kayla Watts. And there's also the return of Isabella Sermon as Maisie, who was one of the most important characters in Fallen Kingdom as well. So I nominated this. This was my pick, but I did have you, Jurassic Mark, in mind because I know you love dinosaurs. Realms, I don't know how much of a fan you were of the Jurassic Park movies of the past, but I was pretty excited for this movie. I didn't think it was gonna be that good. Like, I didn't have high hopes for it, I guess, because most people's opinions of these movies aren't that great to begin with. But I had decent hopes for this movie, and I didn't like it. To be honest, it let me down a lot. Only story-wise, the CGI and everything, the production value of the movie was great, always is, but everything else about the movie kind of disappointed me. So what were y'all's initial thoughts?
As a standalone movie, I didn't mind it, but there was a lot of things that myself and everybody I went with, well, not a lot of things, but a few things, I can't remember what they were saying, but that weren't really clear to them, because it turns out this is the third movie and we didn't see the second one. My girlfriend was saying she just got one of the Facebook memory things. So like 4 years back, we went and saw the first one. So I don't even remember the details from that one to recall for this movie. But like by itself, I didn't mind the movie. I don't know if I would, go see it again myself, but I personally, if somebody wanted to watch it again, I'd watch it with them.
I feel like I must be crazy because people hate this movie. Like, if you go on Rotten Tomatoes or just do a Google search for Jurassic World Dominion, the reviews are brutal. Like, I saw one review which said this isn't a movie, this is, a 2 hour and 30 minute or whatever nostalgia museum. And yet I actually really liked this one. And nobody I've talked to who's seen this movie is of the same opinion. So I don't know if I'm nuts, if everybody else is nuts, both, neither. But yeah, I thought this was a really interesting film. It was way more ambitious than pretty much any Jurassic Park movie since the first one. I liked that it used a mixture of CG and practical effects, and I thought that it explored concepts that have kind of always been lurking under the surface in these movies, but were never really addressed, at least not in the films. The books are another matter. But yeah, I enjoyed this one. I watched it with my wife, and about halfway through the movie, so this was right after the spoiler alert, I guess, but right after the scene where the Raptors, the Atrociraptors, are chasing Owen through Italy. That action scene ends. My wife leans over to me and says, "Mark, there's another hour left in this movie." And I just said, "Hey, I'm enjoying this." And she gave me this look like, "Are you fucking nuts?" So even during the movie, I was getting shade for liking this film.
Question.
Yeah, yeah.
Mark, when you went into the theater to watch the movie,
Mhm.
did you go in with expectations or did you go in open-minded?
I kind of expected it to be bad. And I think, some of, my fellow panelists on this great podcast probably had similar expectations going in. But yeah, I thought it was going to be bad. And I guess I was pleasantly surprised by how interesting it was thematically. And it was unpredictable. Like,
All right.
this wasn't just a by the numbers sequel.
What about you, Farhad? Did you go in with expectations for it?
I'd say I had decent expectations. I think that's what I said earlier, is that I didn't have high expectations, but I had decent expectations because I thought the movie before this, okay, so a lot of people didn't like Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom either, and I thought that movie was okay.
Yeah, it's basically a mystery science theater B movie with a big budget. Like Fallen Kingdom is nuts.
Nuts in a good way or a bad way? Like, what did you think of that movie?
I thought it was nuts in a fun way, but yeah, a lot of folks just straight up hated the movie, and I won't defend it as a good movie. I'll defend
Okay.
it as an entertaining movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I agree with that assessment that like most people don't really like Fallen Kingdom either. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was good. I thought it was okay. This movie is I didn't even think it was okay. I thought it was quite disappointing. And I didn't have I had similar expectations to how I found Fallen Kingdom, and that's why it fell short for me. Rums, I think it's interesting how you say you kind of had no expectations at all because you don't remember the first Jurassic World. I don't know if you remember any of the Jurassic Park movies, but yeah, so this was a complete standalone movie for you. And in that respect, it was okay. I honestly don't know how I would have felt about this movie if I hadn't seen any of them before, but I have. I've seen them all. Jurassic Park 1, legendary film, classic, still the best, hands down. Can we agree on that at least, JM?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay,
Hell yeah.
cool. So the thing about this movie was, and again with Fallen Kingdom, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom ends in a way that kind of sets this movie up, right? Like I was watching Fallen Kingdom, and by the end of it, I get what the premise was. They needed to have Fallen Kingdom to have Dominion. They wanted to have Fallen Kingdom end with dinosaurs being set loose so that the next movie would be mankind coexisting with dinosaurs everywhere. That's what Dominion was supposed to be. And from watching this movie, and I watched it with my fiance, I don't think she liked it that much either. From watching it, it really felt like dinosaurs were not the main theme of the movie. Honestly, it felt more like dinosaurs were a backdrop. Like the main plot of the movie was biosins, genetically engineered locusts that were eating your mom and pop shop farmers' crops and leaving the crops made by Biosyn alone. Mm-hmm. And that was just some evil ploy by Dodgson. And that was it. The dinosaurs were the dinosaurs roaming the entire planet. It was there, it was part of the movie, but it was kind of like a backdrop. The best way I can describe it is if you guys have ever seen like The Walking Dead, right? The zombie TV show, the biggest threat in that world are other dangerous human beings. Zombies are kind of like the backdrop of the show, like another danger, but the main threat, if that makes sense, are other evil human beings. So the main threat of Jurassic World Dominion was Dodgson and Biosyn not really, the movie wasn't really about dinosaurs coexisting with human beings. That's not really the vibe that I was getting from it. And on top of that, the Dodgson character as a villain, he was a really weird villain. No, nothing against the actor. I think the actor did a fine job, Campbell Scott. And Dodgson, if you guys remember, JM, you might remember, he was in Jurassic Park 1.
Yep.
Played by a different actor though. Like I heard that the actor who played him the first time around, he was into some sexual misconduct or whatever, typical creepy Hollywood shit that happens sometimes. So they had to replace the actor. But I'm pretty sure it's the same exact character from that first movie. And he dies the same way that every villain in every Jurassic Park movie dies. He gets eaten or killed by the dinosaurs. It's to be expected at this point, and it wasn't really satisfying. Okay, there were
They didn't
other
even show it, did they?
No, did they show it?
I think they just showed he was in the predicament, and then they just showed like a scream or something. I think that's what...
I think it was implied, but yeah, they didn't really show him getting ripped to shreds or anything.
Yeah, but they implied it in a way where there was no escape. Like I don't think there was any like blink and you'll miss him escaping sort of thing. Like he was surrounded by those dinosaurs from the first movie that Nedry was surrounded by, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
the Dilophosaurus,
Yeah, Dilophosaurus. Nedry was the one who was in cahoots with Dodgson. And I think I remember, I don't know if it was supposed to be the same exact bottle, but that shaving cream bottle that he loses in Jurassic Park, they have it in this movie. Was that meant to be the same exact one? Because I thought the implication from the first movie was that it was lost completely.
I think it was supposed to be the same one, and I, like a lot of critics, have no idea how Dodgson is supposed to have found the thing because it was buried in mud at the end of the first movie. No, that was obviously just a callback to the original Jurassic Park. It's probably one of those it's best not to think about it moments because it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, Dodson's a character who is also in the Jurassic Park novels, and he has a bigger role there, but he kind of went dormant after the first movie until they brought him back for this one.
Speaking of the novels, I kind of really want to read the original Jurassic Park novel one day because you read it, yeah. So the thing about that novel is it's kind of like a horror novel. And from what I remember from reading about it, the author of the book, do you remember the author's name, JM?
Michael Crichton.
Michael Crichton wanted to make it a more fun, lighthearted book, which is kind of what the movie is. But the publishers were saying the book would be a failure if he did that, so he had to make it a horror book, which he did. But the movie ended up being a closer vision to what he wanted his book to be, so it kind of worked out for him in a funny way. But yeah, I do want to read the book one day. This film has been dominating the box office, by the way. I was talking about Lightyear earlier on in this podcast, and the expectation was that Lightyear was going to dominate the box office in its opening weekend, but it didn't. Jurassic World Dominion has been the Dominion dominating the box office for 2 weeks straight. So good for them. I'm happy that the movie is successful. I'm just not thrilled with how the movie was. It's just didn't do it for me, man. The plot was just about getting a sample. Like they had Alan Grant get a sample from the locust just to stop the evil Biosyn. That's really what it was. It was about stopping Biosyn. That's what the movie was about. Am I right? Am I wrong? Tell me, please. If you liked it, like, more power to you, Jam. But tell me if I'm wrong. If there's any part to this that you disagree with.
Well, here's the thing. I get the criticism that the dinosaurs were essentially a backdrop for a different movie. But the thing is, if you really go back and check the record, dinosaurs have always been the window dressing to a larger conversation in this franchise, particularly in the books, and not so much in like the films that have come out between the original movie and this one. But, in the original novel, yes, there are a lot of dinosaur attack sequences, but Michael Crichton is very clearly trying to paint a picture of a dystopic world where corporations that have the power to patent, genetically modified organisms abuse their power. And that is the real threat in the novel. That, the dinosaurs are, of course, running around eating people, but the more serious problem in Crichton's view is the fact that these companies that nobody voted for and nobody is really regulating have the power to like transform our ecosystems and our economy by patenting genetically modified life forms. And that theme really wasn't addressed so much even in the original Jurassic Park movie. This was the film, I think, that finally brought it front and center, this element that's been around since the beginning of, the concept as Crichton envisioned it. Like, okay, the scene where Maisie is hauled into Dodson and he refers to her as his intellectual property. Legally, that's what she is because she was created, artificially, but she's a human being. Like, it obviously there are a lot of very uncomfortable implications with describing a person as your intellectual property. And I commend the movie for interrogating themes about genetic engineering that the other movies never really talked about. Because yeah, of course, if you have the power to clone dinosaurs, you also have the power to clone people, which has, these messy ethical strings attached. And of course, if you have the power to clone dinosaurs, what's stopping you from manipulating the world's food supply with that kind of genetic power? And by the same token, if you've got dinosaurs on the loose in your world, of course there's going to be a black market for like dinosaur meats or like dinosaur fighting, which is something that happens in this movie for those of you who haven't seen it. And I get that the movie is very disjointed, but that almost feels true to the way dramatic changes in our society happen in the real world. The film doesn't have a coherent plot, but I think it captures the apocalyptic tone of something like climate change or COVID, just a sudden problem that hits us and affects us in all sorts of different ways that people wouldn't have necessarily seen coming. It's big, it's sprawling, and it's messy, and so is this movie. And even though it's not a good story, I would argue it's compelling, at least thematically. And again, it's unpredictable.
I hate to do this.
Okay.
But I'm going to talk about Drake really quick.
Oh, all right. All right.
Okay, so the reason why I asked if either of you had expectations for this movie was because, Drake, he dropped a recent project called Honestly Nevermind. Yeah. And there was no forewarning about it. There was no forewarning about it. He just dropped it.
Yeah.
And people listened to it, and a lot of people are talking shit about it. Like they hate it because what he did on this project, he did a lot less rapping, a lot more singing, and then also a different style genre of music for the instrumentals. And for me, I look at this project and I'm like, he didn't stray very far away from what he usually does. It's just now he's just doing more of the singing and less of the rapping. And I think a lot of the reason why people are, not fucking with Jurassic Park, like the ones that had bad things to say about it, they were expecting more about focal point on the dinosaurs, and it ended up being more of the focal point of something that they had been building up to in the background in the past movies about, the biogenetics. Like, people probably weren't expecting it to be more about, the science aspect as opposed to the actual dinosaurs and maybe more dinosaur fights. I don't know, but that's my compare and contrast on it that I'm kind of seeing.
You know what? I never would have thought about it that way, but that sounds exactly right. Like, that's a good analogy there. Also, should be noted that Drake is apparently a Raptors fan, so there's another dinosaur connection for you.
True.
I think he's a stakeholder in the Raptors as well, not just a fan. And I did listen to Honestly Nevermind, and I also wasn't that into it, but I'm just not a big Drake fan to begin with. So, like, my opinion with regard to his music doesn't really matter. But I like Drake. I like Drake as a person. I think he's made the world a better place. Not to make this all about Drake, but not really a fan of his music. Now, with that being said, I I wanted to come into this movie with an open mind. There were certain parts about it that turned into plot holes for me. For I guess getting straight into it. So Lockwood was brought up in this movie as a partner to John Hammond. He wasn't mentioned in any of the Jurassic Park movies. I don't think he was even mentioned in the first Jurassic World movie. He was introduced as kind of a new character in Fallen Kingdom. And it was revealed at the end of Fallen Kingdom that Maisie was a clone. But then this movie kind of retcons that in saying that she was a clone, but she was also kind of the original Maisie's daughter.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case in Fallen Kingdom. They made that how it was here. And she was able to give birth to kind of like an identical twin to herself, I guess, in a way. With technology, she was able to do that. And she had this blood disorder, I think, and she was able to cure her daughter with technology. And they make it a point to say that Blue, the raptor, Blue, the velociraptor, was able to give birth to Beta kind of the same way, but how? They don't really explain how Blue was able to do it. Dr. Williams, Dr. Maisie, I'm sorry, Dr. Lockwood was able to do it with technology in the laboratory. How was Blue able to give birth like that? The original Jurassic Park does establish how dinosaurs are able to change sexes, but it was just Blue. Like you at least need to be able to mate, and it was just Blue. How did Blue? They didn't explain that at all. That just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Well, there was a line about that actually. Dr. Wu said that they used monitor lizard DNA when they made Blue, and he mentioned that, and this is a real phenomenon. Some reptiles can actually make genetic clones of themselves without having made it first. It's called parthenogenesis. And this happened at an aquarium, I want to say a couple of years ago. They had a green anaconda that hadn't gotten the opportunity to breed, and then suddenly it had babies, which, of all the snakes to have like spontaneously reproduce on you, a green anaconda sounds like a handful, but like, no, that is a real world phenomenon. I think that was the explanation they went with in the movie. It was the monitor lizard DNA they used to like plug the gaps in Blue's genetic sequence.
Okay, that sounds really interesting, and I'm gonna look that up later.
I think it's in the movie. I might be talking out of my ass, so by all means, go look it up.
No, I'm not talking about like how they explain it in the movie, just that
Yeah.
real life phenomenon.
Oh no, yeah, that's a real thing. Yeah, parthenogenesis.
Okay, cool, very cool. So I don't really mind the plot of this movie overall. I think you can have an interesting movie about a scientific, a big, huge corporation that has access to dangerously strong technology that can create genetically modified organisms or have the ability to do cloning, and then have the story about these locusts who Biosyn has created to target specific crops that don't belong to themselves so that they can essentially take over the world. That could make for an interesting story. I'm just saying that's not the story I expected here. I expected a story with the way Fallen Kingdom ended. I expected the story of, almost like an apocalyptic level, like how does society live with the consequences of dinosaurs everywhere? That's just generally what I was expecting. I understand what you mean in your explanation of how both of you guys are saying like this is basically what the trilogy or the 6 movies were building up to, but I just I can't find an eloquent way to explain it other than it felt a little bit generic at this point, that it's just in a way it's kind of like the same movie over and over again with a rich guy who wants to like make profit off of the technology that they have and like sell it and take over. In a way it's kind of like the same thing, and then the villain dies the same way over and over again, and then Dr. Henry Wu, who was made to seem kind of benevolent in this movie, but he's always been kind of like a villain character to me. Not in the first movie, but throughout the rest of the films, he came off as kind of like a villain. So I'm not sure how else I can go on explaining my doubts in that regard. But there were other little pieces of this movie that kind of irked me, which was I didn't know if it was Italy or if it was North Africa, that scene where they had like that underground black market. But when Owen is there looking for his daughter and they kind of wreak havoc and some of the dinosaurs are escaping, the carnivorous dinosaurs are escaping. There was this one scene of this guy falling on top of a pit of fire and this other guy spending his last moments trying to save that other guy only to be eaten. I felt really bad for that guy. Now, most people watching this movie would not think twice about this guy getting eaten, and the last thing he ever did was trying to save another guy, and that other guy probably just burned to death, or another dinosaur probably ate him as a barbecue. But that scene was done just as to add extra shock value. To me, it's like that guy didn't deserve that. I don't know. I'm nitpicking at this point, but that was a thing for me. That was a point for me in the movie where I'm like, that was not necessary. It reminded me of a scene in the first Jurassic World movie. I don't know if you guys remember Claire's assistant.
Oh, God, that scene. Yeah.
It's too much.
Well, that felt like, and to be clear, the scene you're referring to, for those who might not like be aware or haven't seen the movie, is the scene where Claire's assistant gets picked up by a pteranodon, then dropped into the mosasaur tank where she's struggling and the pteranodon's pecking at her, and then the mosasaur just swims up and like swallows them both. And this happens like halfway through the movie. The secretary hasn't really done anything at this point. And it felt weird because that's the way villains usually die in these movies. And this was just this random character the movie decided to be super mean to. And yeah, it felt like a scene that was maybe taken from an earlier draft of the script. And then somebody thought, oh, we got to add this scene in, but it just came off as clunky. But yeah, that was a weird sequence.
Yeah, it was mean. And it was completely unnecessary and undeserving of that character. I think we were meant to not like her because she was being kind of like mean to the kids, the nephews, but the kids were being brats and making her job harder, you know? And then the movie just continues without any mention of her.
It's like, well, that happened.
Yeah, that was bad. That was not cool at all. I liked that they brought back Dr. Alan Grant and Dr. Ellie and Dr. Alan Grant. I like that they brought them back, but nostalgia couldn't save it for me. So man, I don't know what else to say without just making myself sound like a Debbie Downer or a party pooper or any other word you can describe to be like a naysayer.
Granted, you know, some of the dinosaur scenes in this movie are pretty damn spectacular. So, you know, the new quote unquote villain dinosaur in the movie is Giganotosaurus, which was a species that really existed, a genus that really existed, I should say. And there's a scene where it chases all of the main characters up this tower while like the forest is on fire. That scene was great. It was tense. They clearly used some practical effects, meaning there was an actual like mechanical dinosaur in a lot of scenes, and it wasn't all computer animated. And because this is supposedly the last movie, I legitimately thought at least one major character was going to die. It didn't happen, but it was tense. And there are a few legitimately impressive dinosaur sequences in the movie. Like, I love when Owen ropes that Parasaurolophus in the American countryside at the beginning. I love the cave scene with the Dimetrodons, you know, the fin-backed animals, which, A, those weren't dinosaurs. They were actually more closely related to people than dinosaurs. And B, they lived a long time before the dinosaurs, but that's neither here nor there. It was still cool to see them. And yeah, and the scene where another non-dinosaur, the Quetzalcoatlus, like attacks the plane. That was a really great little action sequence. So it's not like the prehistoric animals in this film aren't doing anything. Like, you know, they're making their presence felt. It's just the story isn't exclusively about them this time around. But then again, the story of like the past 5 movies pretty much was. So at least this is something of a change of pace. Like you can only tell so many people lost on an island full of killer dinosaur stories before, you lose the audience. You have to shake things up 6 installments into a franchise.
But that's my point, though. All of the rest of the movies were basically, except for the third act of the Lost World Jurassic Park, where the T-Rex is in
The
San
T-Rex in
Francisco.
San Diego,
Yeah.
yeah.
My point has been that like this entire franchise has been about people struggling to survive on an island, on the confines of an island with dinosaurs. So I thought this
Right.
movie was going to be about dinosaurs everywhere and people dealing with that. So which is a change of pace, in my opinion, at least. And I did like that sequence that you were talking about. It won't roll off my tongue the way that it did for you, but I thought that was a pretty intense scene as well.
The Giganotosaurus scene?
That one, yes.
Okay.
I also I also liked the scene of whichever that dinosaur was that was kind of following Claire into the water.
Oh, the Therizinosaurus. Yeah, with the long claws. Those are, I believe, the longest claws of any animal known from the entire fossil record. Like this thing had massive claws and it probably ate plants, which is pretty ironic. But yeah.
I had no idea what the hell her plan was until she actually did it. I was like, yo, you just saw it hearing the deer and it smacked the deer. I was like, why the fuck are you moving? But hey, what she did was smart. It worked.
It worked out. It worked out.
I think I know why, or no, not why. I think I know kind of what Farhad would have liked better. Like if they did the movie with the dinosaurs in the real world in a similar way that they did like Jumanji and all the effects of Jumanji seeping out into the real world, that type of thing. Like that had more outer world interaction with the chaos of what could be in Jumanji in the real world.
I haven't seen. You mean like the new Jumanji, right? With Dwayne Johnson?
No. The original Jumanji.
The OG.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But when they had like the animals running through the street, they fucking getting chased down by the man with the shotgun in the grocery store.
You're not a postal worker, are you?
Oh man. Realms, did you have a favorite character? I feel like since this is kind of a brand new thing for you and standalone, did you have a favorite character?
Come back to me. I gotta think about this. Nah, you know what? I didn't have a favorite character, but I just asked Mark what the name of the biggest dinosaur was. He said Giganotosaurus. And I got something to say, man. I got something to say. Okay. They killed him in the end, right? They had to jump him to do it though. They couldn't see him one-on-one. That's all I gotta say. They couldn't see him one-on-one. So R.I.P. Giganotosaurus, yo.
Yeah, that fight scene was pretty cool. I think it's actually better than the big dinosaur fight at the end of the first Jurassic World. Even though, yeah, I agree that the Giganotosaurus was sort of done dirty there at the end. The T-Rex snuck up on it and like pushed him out of the Therizinosaurus's claws, which was just ridiculous, but I loved it. But yeah, if you go back and watch the Jurassic World fight between the T-Rex and the Indominus Rex, which unlike Giganotosaurus didn't exist, but I'm getting sidetracked, it's kind of hard to get a sense of scale in that fight because it felt like a couple of action figures like throwing each other around. You never get the impression that these are big, heavy animals. Like I think at one point the T-Rex picks the Indominus up by the scruff of the neck and then just throws it. And in real life, that would be like seeing somebody like flip over a Mack truck. Like that would be a huge, huge object just crashing to the ground. In this fight, I felt like there was a sense of scale. Like when the T-Rex gets knocked over, it looks like it hurt. Like, it gets knocked over onto the slab and then boom. And they used a lot of low angles, which just made the dinosaurs look even bigger. So I don't know. I appreciated that.
I liked the fight with the Giganotosaurus as well.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And yeah, it dies. I don't know if it's he or she, probably a she, right? So she dies at the end. But I also thought, I think the first or one of the encounters with the Giganotosaurus, if it was that dinosaur with Dr. Ian Malcolm with the torch and how he's trying to distract the dinosaur, I think that was a callback to the first one. I think.
Yeah, totally.
So Realms, I highly recommend you check out the first few movies just because you haven't, I'm not sure if you've seen them, but I recommend you check it out. There was even a scene with the T-Rex where he kind of walks, or he or she kind of walks into this circle, and it's supposed to look like the Jurassic Park symbol as well. So they did it. They did that as well. And I think I do have a favorite character. It was going to be between Kayla and Ramsey, but I think I like Ramsey the best because he's very polite. Like he was just very wholesome, it seemed. You know, he was doing his job at Biosyn, and you couldn't really tell whose side he was on because he was working for Biosyn. And Dawson even says he's like a younger me, only taller or something like that. But he ended up being on the good side and survived at the end. So I like that.
I'm not gonna lie. At first, I wasn't really sure if we could trust him. when he set them up for to go on the transit or whatever it's called. Yeah, I thought he was setting them up.
It could have gone either way. It definitely could have gone either way. Yeah.
Question for you guys: Did they know? Did they know him from the previous movies? Because the two characters that their daughter got kidnapped, they showed up, right, and then they met up with everybody else, and then the guy that worked for Biosin, he showed up, while everybody was evacuating. He showed up and he was just helping them figure out how to get out, and they kind of just like accepted him, like they didn't question who he was. So I wasn't sure. That was one issue some of us had with it, because we were like he only knew the two people that came to visit the factory, or whatever you want to call it, but the other two, they didn't seem to have known him previously.
Are you talking about Ramsey?
Yeah,
Well,
like
Alan
like
Grant and Ellie, they're like legends. So I think that's how they got away. What other two
no,
characters?
no. Them two, they met him when they got there.
Yeah.
The other two, they were looking for their daughter. They showed up,
Oh,
and then
Owen
when
and
they were
Claire.
all
Yeah.
together, he ended up showing up out of nowhere, and and it was like, yo, like they didn't even question who he was or if he was there to help them or not.
If you
He
could be
just said,
trusted. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. We didn't know if they were just like reading the room. Everybody else knew him and they were cool with him, so they didn't say nothing. But I don't know.
They might have just been thinking that like they could use all the help they could get. I don't know. Well, yeah, that is a good point. That is a good counterpoint. I don't know. Can't say much there, but I have a feeling that the franchise isn't over and that there will be more Jurassic movies to come or a series or something. We'll see. I
Just
think I
make a
have
whole movie about Kayla. Like, she's a badass. Oh, yeah, sorry, carry on.
no, you're right. She was cool. She was my second favorite probably in this movie. She made it sound like that black market would be a dangerous place, and she ends up deciding to help Claire, which was also cool. I was just gonna say that I can't think of anything else I want to talk about at the moment. So if you guys want to say anything else on your minds now, we could. If not, we could just go into readings.
This movie gave me. It reminded me of a slight PTSD that I've gotten from video games.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Anybody play Gears of War?
Only a little bit, and I think it was the second one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when they started showing like locusts, that gave me slight PTSD because we had to fight locusts or avoid locusts in that game, in one of the games. Actually, I think maybe all the games, maybe.
Dang. Well, you said you'd be down to watch this movie again, so I hope You don't get too triggered each and every time. Okay. Jam, any final thoughts before we go into ratings? Any last like things you want to like point out, I guess?
I mean, I'll just reiterate that this film has a very disjointed and confused story. It's not focused the way other Jurassic Park films are focused, but I think in a strange way that helps the movie feel more apocalyptic and chaotic, which is consistent with the theme of a society in crisis. I'm pretty sure that was a mistake. Like, I think this was supposed to be a more coherent story, but the end product, I think, captured this feeling of just an ecological disaster really well because it was all over the place and because it mixed and matched so many genres. Like, part of the movie felt like an Indiana Jones film, like when they're in Italy, you know? And then part of it feels like a corporate espionage film, and then part of it feels like a traditional Jurassic Park film. But yeah, I kind of liked that this was this sort of thematic Frankenstein's monster of a movie.
Yeah, it ultimately it is like a sci-fi action adventure film, but it
Yeah.
does take a lot of different avenues. It just wasn't the film that I thought it was going to be, and that's why ultimately for me it was disappointing.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. Not the worst blockbuster film I've ever seen, but I was I can't say that I liked it. I can't even say if I would want to watch it again. Only if someone else wanted to watch it, I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's watch it. But I don't really have the desire at this moment to watch it again.
Mm.
I'm sorry.
I will give it a 6.5, like a fair 6.5. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad movie or anything, but there were, little different things that they could have done that people were expecting. Like the death of the main villain, or the
Dodgson.
yeah, like honestly, I was expecting more of like I don't know if you guys have seen Deep Blue Sea, where Samuel L. Jackson is giving his his speech, and a fucking shark just comes out and gobbles him up. Like, I was expecting to see something from that.
Pretty funny.
But yeah,
Yeah.
6.5 for me.
I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I realize that's me being generous, and I absolutely understand why people would give this a 5 or lower. Like, I get why some people would give this movie like a negative number. I understand all the criticisms of the film. I just think it's the most interesting and ambitious Jurassic movie we've had since the first one. And I liked a lot of individual elements a lot. So, but I'm weird. So take what I say with a grain of salt.
I think 7 is fair. First, I don't think 7 is unfair. You
It's
call it being generous, but I was
yeah.
expecting you to aim it higher, score it higher. Yeah.
I mean, this movie has problems. It has like massive script problems. It's very long. It's like 2.5 hours long. I won't deny that the film has problems, but it's really interesting and really unpredictable, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, it certainly was unpredictable because I could not predict a plot of what it could have been, but the plot we got could have been its own movie. I don't know. I don't want to stray off anymore. Like I already talked about everything I disliked. But yeah, I'd say I would still recommend it. If you're a Jurassic Park fan, I would still recommend watching it. And it's worth watching for sure. I wouldn't say skip it. I wouldn't say like no, it's not even worth your time. It's a long movie, but if you're into sci-fi, if you're into dinosaurs, definitely check it out at least once and then formulate your own opinion. That's what I think.
I feel like it's an okay movie that just went in a different direction than most people expected. And when that happens, then people overreact and give it much, much lower of a score than it really deserves. But I think it's in the middle. It's in the middle.
Cool. Very good. Sounds good to me, fellas. Movie guys. Who's up next? Realms, I think it's you.
Oh no, it's on me.
Oh yes.
Your turn, man.
Oh no. Well, I was not prepared for this. So I'm gonna have to try to think really quickly. Okay, hold on. I think I know a good one.
Oh my god. This is low-key hilarious.
I mean, I'm looking forward to this. My anticipation is growing.
Chill with Realms.
Mm.
Okay, we got a name.
All right, wait, what is it?
Okay. The movie is called Premonition. It's a movie that me and my girl watched. I think it was Sandra Bullock that was in the movie. And it's really weird because her husband dies in the movie. And for some reason, she's like phasing into different periods of time of the events that happened. So it's I don't know, it's one of those kind of mindfuck type movies a little bit.
All right.
I'm good with the mindfuck as long as it's not a horror movie.
It's not a horror, but
Okay.
like I mean it's not as strange as like Triangle, but it's
That's
still
going back
cool.
a ways.
Yeah, it is. Triangle was a good one.
Yeah. This one it made me think of Triangle. I don't know if it's as good as Triangle or if maybe it's better than Triangle. I'll leave it up for y'all to decide on that one.
All
I
right.
guess in a funny way, it's a cool callback to Triangle because that was our debut of making this podcast, a 3-man podcast. So
Hell yeah.
Ah.
Premonition.
Now I forget. I'm not sure where you can watch it though. I forget. You might have to rent it off YouTube or something
That's
like
fine.
that.
Yeah.
Because it was on Netflix, but like when we watched it, it was already advertising that it was about to be taken off of Netflix at the time. Soon.
Yeah.
No problem, man.
Yeah.
Jay, I'm sorry. I think I cut you off. You were about to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's coming full circle, rather like a time loop movie. So that's perfect.
Perfect. Cool.
Started with a time loop movie, and now we're back to a time loop.
Oh my god.
Let's do the time warp again.
Let's do it. Let's start this shit up. Okay. That just about does it for this episode of MGI. You've been listening to the voices of
Chill with Rooms.
Jurassic Mark.
and Osheem, the one and only. Thank you all for tuning in and catch us again in July.
In the famous words of Kendrick. Can't please everybody.
Insert raptor noises here.